You weren't dealing with a group of 10 young people that were angry. You were dealing with a high number of young people from across the UK that were angry, that were hurt, that were traumatised, that were suffering. So decisions were made within the trial to hold back certain information from myself. I think with the public and with the amount of emotion, and when you've got so many young people, they weren't just upset, they were heartbroken and traumatised. And the first point that I became Depz's mum in the public capacity was probably about 7 minutes after he died, because I was given a choice, and that choice was the police can tell them that he's died, or you can. It was like sitting with each second taking, it felt like slow motion. It's like you see in films where one person's sitting there still and you've got the manic around them. Nurses, police, friends, fans, screaming, crying, anger, and it's like...
People, you're now watching the Daily Devotion podcast, the space where we connect and engage with creatives from various industries to share insights on their journey thus far. So all that happened that night, was this like obviously it's a minor argument, but obviously whoever thought that, do you know what, I'm going to inflict this to Joshua, was that like a heat of the moment thing, or is it premeditated? Like, do you know if it was premeditated, if it was spoke about, or?
So this is where it's really difficult, and I will speak about it as to the best of my ability. Premeditated is what they said. It wasn't in the trial. But my opinion is, if you pick up a weapon, walk behind someone, have previously said you're going to stab them, and then stab them, it might not be in the term of law premeditated, and it might just be a moment of madness, but I think there was definitely a period of time when it could have been very, very different. And I think for me, premeditated is where you think, I'm going to do this, you go to do it. But I do think there was an element of awareness as to a situation was going to occur. So yeah, and it's very difficult for me, which a lot of people probably don't realise or probably even appreciate, because of the public outpouring of grief, because of the emotion, because of the anger. And you weren't dealing with a group of 10 friends that were angry. You were grouping with... Sorry, let me say that again. You weren't dealing with a group of 10 young people that were angry. You were dealing with a high number of young people from across the UK that were angry, that were hurt, that were traumatised, that were suffering. So decisions were made within the trial to hold back certain information from myself, not to allow me in the courtroom when the young man that was on trial spoke, because it was decided that if I was to get really upset, really angry, really emotional, is that going to trigger more problems on the street? Is that going to trigger fights, injury, riots possibly? So I think the priority in some case within the trial wasn't me, wasn't Josh. It was more of the kind of public safety element. And so I really missed out on huge elements. And the final thing that they did, I want to say their argument will be it was in the public interest not to let this happen. But here I am 8.5 years later, feeling quite, not outdone, but I don't think it was fair. I think it was unfair that because of Joshua's profile in the case, that it was me that suffered through the normal process that you should be able to go through the courts. There's something called a victim impact statement. I put my heart and soul into that. And when it came to the day to read it out, it was decided that it would never be allowed to be read out publicly. It wasn't read out by me. It wasn't allowed to be read out anywhere within the trial, because they were so concerned that it would trigger an emotional response. And obviously the last thing anybody wants is riots on the street, more bloodshed. And I just had to go, okay, because people looking at me and my emotion could have influenced people, but I also did a very good job of containing that emotion. And I don't think people give me credit for how hard that is. And I don't mean credit as in, oh, well done, Alison, because it wasn't like that. But I mean, people in authority don't think, gosh, if it wasn't for her, we could have had a real dangerous situation on our hand. You know, we had no retaliations, we had no more arrests, we had no more bloodshed. And a lot of that was down to do with how it was managed by myself, by people that were close to Josh. But I missed out. I missed out on knowing that. And, you know, a couple of weeks ago, it's been notified to me that there was information held back from the case that they're beginning to share with me that is absolutely traumatising to do with Josh. I found out very recently that while he was waiting for the ambulance, he was gurgling blood. And yet, as his mum, I should have been told that. Because when something so traumatic happens and it's so horrendous, you're caught up in such a huge amount of trauma, they can tell you anything. And you're traumatised anyway. But now, 8.5 years down the line, to hear certain things and certain comments and statements, I should have known this already. And I'm going to be going back through some of the court paperwork to try and find out what really happened in relation to certain elements, surgery, the injury, going into a coma, the surgical procedures that were carried out on him, the heart attacks, the intervention. And yet that's something I should have known. But as Depzman's mum, the profile meant that was something that couldn't really be shared with me at that point, which I find very, very difficult. And here we are, 8.5 years later, that's what I'm going to have to face. And that's really hard. Very, very difficult.
You touch upon so much things just in that moment that just relate to us completely. Just an inhumane response from the people who are really supposed to protect us, really.
I think they had to look at
the impact.
I think, they had to look at what was in the public interest. Do we really want thousands of young people on the street?
What about your interest?
I know. But I think if you had to say to me, would I have had it any different and people be put at risk? No, I would have had it how it was. However, I'm very aware that this is something that's very difficult for me to face now, without the support that maybe was in place after it first happened and for the following couple of years. But, I have a choice to hear that information. I have a choice to see certain footage that I've never been shown before. Will I do that?
And is this 8.5 years later? Like.
Yeah.
I can't really speak on, a grieving process, even if it even had one, because of the media and the public kind of.
Yeah, I've never been able to grieve, and I've never been able to. I spoke about this earlier. Somebody said, "How do you do this? How did you get back up after?" Well, I never went down, and that's might be a strange thing to say, and that's not. Oh, check me out. I think with the public and with the amount of emotion, and when you've got so many young people, they weren't just upset; they were heartbroken and traumatised. And the first point that I became Depz's mum in the public capacity was probably about 7 minutes after he died, because I was given a choice, and that choice was the police can tell them that he's died, or you can. And I, in that split moment, thought, well, the last thing I want is that news to be broken in a way that isn't sensitive, isn't compassionate, and doesn't have consideration. And I don't really have the trust for that police officer to go out and do that. So I thought, I'm his mum, I'm going to tell them. And then from that point, went home, I sat on my floor and I screamed from the pit of my stomach, and then the door never stopped. And from that point, when you've got people in front of you, screaming for Josh, screaming for Depzman, self-harming, taking drugs.
That's what I mean. It's
You have a choice, and I remember looking at him and thinking, comforting you is not going to be harder than living without Josh. And I love Josh and I manage Josh, and when a child dies, that love doesn't go. What do I do with that love? What do I do with it? And if someone's in front of me and my arms can go around them and that love can just be redirected, which comforts me and comforts them, bring it on.
It works the opposite though, because see, as you know, with, you know, those who transition, it's always flowers at the door, you know, support, how are you? Everybody's in and out your house every day, cooking for you. Nights last for 3 to 6 months, if not longer. But that was a thing that you had to not host, but provide that support and that love for everybody else. Like,
I didn't have to.
Well,
I also wanted to, because I didn't know what else to do. The Alison that's now, I look back and think, oh my, what on earth was going on? How did I do that? Why did I do that? Would I do it now? The Alison that's now, no. But you can't possibly think straight in that moment, because you are dealing with stuff that you don't have a moment to consider. You are dealing with your child, your only son, everything to your world, your purpose has gone, and you've got the police coming at you, you've got witnesses, you've got the public, you've got lies, you've got rumours, you've got arrests, you've got investigations, you've got funeral, and you're just like this. What do you do? What can you do? You're not brave to organise your child's funeral. You don't have a choice. You're not brave to pick the clothes for your child. You don't have a choice. It's not bravery. It's trauma, pain, and you have no choice. You don't think, I'm going to be brave and I'm going to do this. You have to. And the people that were so desperately in pain, I was suddenly there. My heart was overflowing with love for Josh. And the only way I can describe it, it just dripped out of my heart and went in their direction.
Like, how did you even find out? Was it like a phone call, like a knock at the door? Was it like a mate, a relative? Like how?
So what happened was he'd gone out to the party, and I was sitting there, and the door knocked around 10:30 on the evening, and the first thing I thought was, how come the door's knocked? Josh is never early, so that's weird. I wasn't scared, I wasn't frightened, I just thought that's strange. I opened the door and a girl was standing there, and it was actually the girl that the minor argument had been over. But she did nothing wrong. And people, when something like this happens, human nature is to find somebody to blame, because to find someone to blame enables that pain to be released. But she wasn't to blame. But at that point, a lot of people didn't realise that it wasn't her choice to go home and, to pick up a knife and stab Josh. She was just a minor part of a big mess. So she knocked the door. She was inconsolable. Her face was just covered in mascara, and she just went, he has been stabbed. And it was literally like the wind was taken out of my soul, and I just knew. I knew that this was going to be the end, and this was the journey towards a horrendous situation. You don't automatically think Josh is going to die, but I just felt something in my soul and my heart that there's nothing good is going to come from whatever is the next part of our journey together. So I got into the car with her. She was so inconsolable, panic stricken. She kept repeating the name of the boy that stabbed Josh, and I was just so in need to focus. Don't speak, don't talk to me. I need to get to my son. Mm-hmm. And if you speak to me, you're taking me out of the zone of Josh's mum, and that's who I need to be. And I got out the car at the hospital, and there was just all these people at the hospital. I'm thinking, and you don't go, oh, you just think,
Get out the way. I need to get...
It was just like sectioning different traumas. You're there, but I need to be there. So there's no thought that needs to go into that because I just need to get to Josh. Got to the hospital. My mum head was like, do I need to register him? Do I need to fill in a form? Does he need his date of birth? You know when you go to A&E?
He's still alive at this point.
He's still alive at that point. And they said, you don't need to do this, just please go through. So I went through 3 nurses who looked incredibly distressed, which kind of took me back a bit because, you know, I've got so much respect for nurses, paramedics, because they deal with trauma all the time. But they looked unusually distressed. And they just said, we're working on him. And you just think, okay. You know, they said, we're working on him. And then I was like, okay. And then I went, where's he been stabbed? Because all I tried to do within that moment of sheer panic was try and reassure myself to enable me to survive that moment. So I thought if they say leg, arm, my perception is, okay. And when they said chest, I thought, I said, they're not telling me chest, heart. And I said, where though in his chest? His chest, Alison, so they wouldn't tell me. And then it was like sitting with each second taking, it felt like slow motion. It's like you see in films where one person's sitting there still and you've got the manic around them, nurses, police, friends, fans, screaming, crying, anger, and it's like... And even at that point, it's like, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And the underlying part of that wasn't, oh, I need to be this person. It was like, if they kick off, the police are going to then make arrests. It's going to make it worse. I need to focus on this. I need to calm them down, focus on Josh. Calm them down, focus on Josh. And then early hours of the morning, they came and said, right, he's stable. We're taking him up to intensive care. So I went out and said, he's stable, taken him to intensive care. A lot of people then left to get drinks, food, to come back. And then quite shortly after that, they said, we're going to move you to the family room. And I didn't want to sit anywhere. I just wanted to sit on the cold floor because it was so hard to do this with everything going on around me. And the other thing I didn't do, which is I wouldn't phone my family to get them to come because... my parents were elderly and I remember thinking, and my daughter, I'm not going to phone them with all the trauma we've had in our life. I'm not going to phone them and say, Josh has been stabbed, be in limbo, in pain, with the unknown. I'm very like, this is what it is. So I thought I'll ring them when I know what it is, because I don't know what it is yet. Is he dead? Is he alive? Is he brain damaged? Is he okay? I don't know because no one's telling me anything. And then... a really weird thing happened. There was another family who were very upset, and I don't know why, I don't know how, I felt Josh pass. And I'm not spiritual, I'm not religious, but I just had this feeling. And I remember standing up and telling them that my son had passed away and that their son was going to be okay, which potentially could have been a really bad thing to say. Their son was okay, and Josh had passed. And as I stood up, consultant, the surgeon, the nurse were all walking towards me. The colour was drained out their face and they looked absolutely traumatised. And I just shut that down and said, listen, I know you would have done everything you could have done. Don't feel guilty. Don't be sad. I already know if you could have saved him, you would. And they just couldn't even speak. They were inconsolable. And I found out in the last 3 weeks why that was, and I'll share that with you. And it's very difficult. If I get upset, just ignore me. They said that he was stabbed through 2 of his ribs and stabbed in his heart when he was taken to surgery because he was so fit, young, you know, athletic, that he was strong. So blood loss, heart rate, his heart rate was dropping all the way down to fatal, flatlining, coming back, oxygen levels rose, blood pressure rose, and they were like, this one's going to survive, he's fighting. And I actually met one of the nurses who put her hand in his chest and was massaging his actual heart.
Oh, gosh.
And she said to me, the thing that traumatised us, which was very unusual we thought he'd survive because he came back 7 times from flatlining, and we thought he doesn't want to leave. And the public element of Josh, people tell me these things, and she said that when he took his final breath and died, they couldn't believe he hadn't survived. And so they were traumatised. And so were a lot of staff. A lot of staff said they'd never seen such an outpouring of pain around an individual at the hospital, that it stuck with them for a long time. Lots of staff were signed off. Lots of staff left, were traumatised, because there were many, many young people screaming from the bottom of their souls for their friend, their music icon, for Josh. And it was a very, 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 very difficult thing. So every time I think I'm taking one step forward, I get pulled straight back. But
even just like sitting here, hearing your experiences, how you depict the images so vivid, it's so raw. But nothing that you said in that was in relation to how you was feeling, you know. And that is remarkable, because you have just lost your child, you know. Tragically, he's been murdered, and yet you have this element of selflessness to keep going out to them, like, so like updating them, like you hadn't even, out of compassion, out of care, out of I don't even know, not contacted your own family to console you, and then to reassure the staff members that they did all of what they could do, and it's like, even as you explain stuff, it's not as Alison, it's as Depzman's mum. It's as
but Alison was never really Alison, because Alison was a traumatised little girl. Alison was a traumatised teenager. Alison was a traumatised young woman. Alison only became the person that she should have become. Really, when I became Joshua's mum. So I was never Alison. I never became Alison. I'm still not Alison. I was Joshua's mum, and I still am Joshua's mum. So even in a moment of horror, I was Joshua's mum. I had to always, to be Joshua's mum meant being on high alert, living in pain, living in concern, living on, that high alert status, which is very much linked to post-traumatic stress, and I think that most people, I don't know, I can't talk about other people. It wasn't done with any thought. It wasn't done with any, this is the right thing to do. It wasn't done with, I'm going to try and do something. There was no thought process. It was like, look how much pain these people are in, and it was just unbearable. Just totally unbearable seeing grown men and young men, young women just so broken, and to know that the pain that came out of them. And I thought, well, me thinking of, and it's not, people might say, and I appreciate why they would say it, but it's not going to comfort my pain by... It's not going to make any difference to my pain, but it can make a difference to their lives, and their lives might be able to get through this and come out the other end, and most people have. Most people have moved on. Most people have been enabled to still be who they are. They hold Josh in their heart, and they've been able to grieve. They've been able to grieve. They've been able to express. I haven't, but that wasn't because of them. That wasn't because of what I did. That's because how could I possibly?